Woman takes a picture of her husband on a mountain, then she spotted someone standing behind him. Emma lowered her camera and felt a chill that had nothing to do with the mountain air. "Jake!" she called out, her voice barely audible over the whisper of wind through the pines. "There's someone behind you in this picture." Her husband turned, scanning the empty ridge behind him. "What? Where?" But when Emma looked up from her camera's display, there was no one there. Just the vast emptiness of the mountain wilderness stretching in every direction. 12 hours earlier, their day had begun with the kind of excitement that only comes from long-anticipated adventures. Emma had woken before their alarm, already mentally checking her packing list for the 4th time. She nudged Jake awake, her enthusiasm impossible to contain. "It's hiking day," she whispered, planting a kiss on his forehead. Jake groaned but smiled into his pillow. 5 more minutes. The mountains aren't going anywhere. But our reservation at the trail might," Emma reminded him. "And I want to get there early enough to catch the morning light." Photography wasn't just a hobby for Emma, it was how she processed the world. Each frame she captured told a story, preserved a memory. As a freelance photographer who specialized in nature shots, this hiking trip was both pleasure and potential portfolio material. Jake rolled out of bed, running a hand through his tousled hair. "You know, most people go on vacation to relax," he teased. "We'll relax at the summit," Emma promised, already heading for the shower. "With views that'll make all the effort worthwhile." The drive to Blackrock Mountain took them through sleepy towns and eventually along winding roads that climbed steadily upward. Emma's camera rested in her lap, occasionally capturing the changing landscape through the passenger window. Jake drove with one hand on the wheel, the other holding Emma's free hand, their fingers intertwined in comfortable silence. "I've been reading about this trail for years," Emma said as they approached the ranger station. "It's supposed to be one of the most photographed spots in the state, but somehow still feels untouched." "Well, we picked a good time to come," Jake replied. "Middle of the week, end of season, should be nice and quiet." The ranger station was a rustic cabin with wide windows facing the mountain range. Inside, a middle-aged man with sun-weathered skin and a neatly trimmed beard greeted them from behind a wooden counter. "Morning, folks," he said, accepting their reservation information. "Blackrock Trail, overnight permit." He checked his computer. "You're the only ones with a reservation for that trail today. Should have the mountain all to yourselves." Emma exchanged a pleased glance with Jake. This was even better than they'd hoped. "Any wildlife we should watch for?" Jake asked as he signed the necessary forms. "Bears are always a possibility, but they've been keeping their distance lately," the ranger replied. "Usual precautions: keep food sealed, make noise on blind corners. Trail conditions are good, but there's a storm system moving in tomorrow evening, so you'll want to be back down by then. We plan to camp at Eagles Point tonight and head back early tomorrow," Emma said, studying the trail map displayed on the wall. The ranger nodded approvingly. "Perfect spot for sunrise photos. Just be careful around the ridges, beautiful views, but steep drops." With permits secured and safety briefing complete, they drove to the trailhead parking area. Only 3 other cars sat in the lot, likely belonging to hikers on different trails. Emma took a deep breath of the pine-scented air as they hoisted their backpacks, feeling the familiar weight settle comfortably across her shoulders. "Ready for this?" Jake asked, adjusting his hip belt. Emma nodded, securing her camera in its padded case at her side. "More than ready." The first mile was gentle, a steady incline through dense forest that occasionally opened to reveal glimpses of the valley below. Emma stopped frequently, capturing the way sunlight filtered through leaves, turning ordinary scenes into ethereal landscapes. Jake walked ahead, occasionally pointing out interesting rock formations or particularly majestic trees. "Look," he whispered at one point, gesturing toward a small clearing where a doe and her fawn grazed peacefully. Emma raised her camera slowly, capturing the moment just before the deer noticed them and bounded gracefully away. By midday, they'd covered 5 miles and gained considerable elevation. The forest had thinned, giving way to rocky outcroppings and expansive views. They paused for lunch on a flat boulder, sharing trail mix and sandwiches as they looked out over 3 mountain ranges. "Worth every step," Jake said, passing Emma a water bottle. She nodded, taking in the panorama before them. "And we haven't even reached the best part yet." After lunch, the trail grew steeper and narrower. In some places, it hugged the mountainside so closely that Emma kept one hand on the rock face for balance. Jake led the way, occasionally reaching back to offer her a steadying hand on particularly challenging sections. "Almost there," he called back as they rounded a bend in the trail. "Eagles Point should be just ahead." Emma felt a surge of anticipation. Eagles Point was famous among landscape photographers, a dramatic outcropping that offered unobstructed views in nearly every direction. As they emerged from a narrow passage between 2 towering boulders, the landmark came into view. It was even more spectacular than the photos she'd studied. A flat, table-like formation of rock jutted out from the mountainside, creating a natural viewing platform with nothing but air for hundreds of feet below. "Careful," Jake cautioned as they approached the edge. "Solid ground, but no guardrails out here." Emma nodded, already framing shots in her mind. "Go stand near the edge," she directed, raising her camera. "Not too close, just enough to get you against that backdrop." Jake moved into position, his figure small against the vast landscape. Emma adjusted her settings, capturing the perfect exposure as the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the mountains. "Perfect," she murmured, checking the image on her display screen. That's when she saw it, a figure standing behind Jake, partially obscured by shadow. A man in dirty hiking clothes, slightly hunched, watching them from about 20 feet away. Emma lowered her camera and felt a chill that had nothing to do with the mountain air. "Jake!" Emma called out again, her voice stronger this time. "There's someone behind you in this picture." Jake jogged over, his brow furrowed with concern. "Let me see." Emma handed him the camera, her hands slightly trembling. Jake squinted at the small display screen, zooming in on the background. "Huh," he said, his expression shifting from concern to confusion. "That's weird. Definitely looks like someone." The figure was unmistakably human, a man in faded hiking clothes that appeared weathered and dirty. His posture was slightly hunched, face angled just enough that his features weren't clearly visible. But something about him seemed off, almost ghostly in the mountain light. Emma took the camera back, scanning the landscape behind Jake. The rocky plateau stretched empty in all directions, with nowhere anyone could have disappeared to in the few seconds between taking the photo and looking up. "Where did he go?" Emma whispered, more to herself than to Jake. "He was right there, maybe 20 feet behind you." Jake turned a slow circle, surveying their surroundings. The only sounds were the whistle of wind and the occasional cry of a distant hawk. "Maybe he ducked behind those boulders," he suggested, pointing to a rocky formation nearby. Emma shook her head. "I would have seen him move. He was just there. And now he's gone." A cloud passed over the sun, casting the mountaintop in momentary shadow. Emma shivered, suddenly aware of how exposed they were. "Let's check it out," Jake said, always the practical one. He started walking toward the spot where the figure had appeared in the photo. Emma followed, clutching her camera tightly. The area yielded nothing unusual, just bare rock and sparse alpine vegetation. No footprints, no signs that anyone had been standing there moments ago. "This doesn't make sense," Emma said, looking back at the spot where she had stood to take the picture, mentally reconstructing the angle. "He was right here." Jake knelt, examining the ground closely. "No tracks," he confirmed. "But the ground's pretty hard up here." Emma flipped through the other photos she'd taken. The figure didn't appear in any of the shots before or after, just in that one perfect capture of Jake against the mountain backdrop. "Could it be a glitch in the camera?" Jake suggested. "Some kind of double exposure?" Emma shook her head firmly. "I've been using this camera for years. That's not how digital photography works." Jake straightened up, brushing dust from his hands. His expression had shifted from concern to mildly amused. "Well, it's definitely strange," he admitted. "But maybe it's just another hiker who wandered off trail." The ranger could have missed them when checking today's permits. And they just vanished into thin air? Emma challenged, gesturing at the open terrain around them. Jake shrugged. Maybe they ducked behind something when they realized they were in your shot. Some people don't like being photographed. Emma wanted to believe this rational explanation, but something about the figure's appearance, the weathered clothes, the strange posture, the way he seemed to be watching them, left her deeply unsettled. Let me try something, she said, walking to the exact spot where the figure had stood. Take a picture of me standing here. Jake raised an eyebrow but took the camera and snapped a photo. Emma examined it immediately. Nothing unusual, Jake confirmed, showing her the screen. Just you looking worried against a bunch of rocks. Emma took a deep breath, trying to calm her racing thoughts. Let's keep going, she decided. But I'm keeping my camera ready. They continued along the trail, Emma constantly glancing over her shoulder. The path narrowed as it wound around the mountain's western face, hugging the cliff edge in places. The views were spectacular, but Emma barely noticed, too preoccupied with scanning their surroundings. You're really spooked, aren't you? Jake asked after catching her looking behind them for the dozenth time. Wouldn't you be? Emma countered. We're supposed to be alone up here. Jake considered this. I don't think we're in any danger, he said finally. If someone else is hiking up here, they're probably just doing their own thing. People seek out these remote trails for solitude. Then why didn't they identify themselves? Emma asked. Why disappear like that? Jake had no answer for that. They reached a small plateau that offered natural shelter, a half-cave formed by an overhanging rock. According to their map, this was Eagle's Rest, their planned campsite for the night. Perfect timing, Jake said, checking his watch. We've got about 3 hours of daylight left. Plenty of time to set up camp. Emma nodded absently, her attention still focused on their back trail. The plateau offered a commanding view of the path they'd traveled, and she studied it intently, looking for any sign of movement. As Jake unpacked their tent, Emma set up her tripod and attached her longest zoom lens. She aimed it down the trail, scanning methodically, taking occasional photos to check details she couldn't make out clearly with her naked eye. Anything? Jake asked, hammering in a tent stake. No, Emma admitted. Nothing. As the sun began its descent, casting long shadows across the mountainside, Emma helped Jake finish setting up camp. They worked in comfortable silence, the routine familiar from previous adventures. But Emma couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Over a simple dinner of dehydrated stew heated on their portable stove, Emma reviewed all the photos she'd taken that day on her camera's larger display screen. I still don't get it, she said, examining the mysterious photo again. He looks so real, but where did he come from? Where did he go? Jake leaned over her shoulder, studying the image. In the fading light, the figure seemed even more unsettling, a dark silhouette against the rocky background, watching Jake from behind. Maybe, Jake began, then hesitated. Maybe what? Emma prompted. Jake looked uncomfortable. Maybe it's not a person at all. Emma stared at him. What do you mean? I mean, Jake said slowly, maybe it's something else entirely. As darkness settled around their small tent, the wind picked up, whistling through the rocks with an almost human sound. Neither of them slept much that night. Morning arrived with harsh clarity, sunlight slicing through gaps in their tent fabric. Emma had managed only a few hours of fitful sleep, her dreams haunted by a shadowy figure that always remained just out of clear view. Jake, despite his attempts at rationality the previous evening, had tossed and turned beside her. Let's pack up early, Emma suggested, her voice hoarse from the dry mountain air. I want to get back to the ranger station. Jake nodded, not bothering to argue. The lingering unease of the night had evidently affected him too. They worked efficiently, breaking down their campsite in record time. Emma kept her camera close, occasionally scanning the surrounding area through her zoom lens. The mountain appeared peaceful in the morning light, beautiful, serene, and completely deserted. Which way did we come up again? Jake asked, studying their trail map. Emma pointed toward the eastern path. Through that narrow passage between the boulders, then down along the ridge. They set off at a brisk pace, both eager to descend. Unlike their ascent, when Emma had stopped frequently to photograph the landscape, they now moved with singular purpose. The only sounds were their boots on the rocky trail and the occasional call of birds overhead. "Wait," Emma said suddenly, about an hour into their descent. She stopped so abruptly that Jake nearly collided with her. "What is it?" he asked, instantly alert. Emma pointed to a narrow trail branching off their main path, a trail they hadn't noticed on their way up. "That wasn't there yesterday," she said with complete certainty. Jake frowned, stepping closer to examine it. "It must have been. We probably just missed it." "No," Emma insisted. "I would have seen it. I notice everything when I'm scouting photography locations." The side trail appeared well-worn but narrow, winding between large boulders before disappearing around a bend. It wasn't marked on their map. "Should we check it out?" Jake asked, his curiosity momentarily overriding their mutual desire to get off the mountain. Emma hesitated, then shook her head firmly. "No. I want to talk to the ranger first." They continued downward, but Emma couldn't shake the feeling that something was following them. Every few minutes she would stop and turn suddenly, hoping to catch a glimpse of whatever, or whoever, might be behind them. But the trail remained empty. "There's no one there, Em," Jake said gently after her fourth abrupt halt. "I know what I saw in that picture," she replied, her voice tight with frustration. "Someone was there, Jake. Someone who shouldn't have been." By midday, they had made it back to the main trail junction, where paths to various destinations split off in different directions. The increased foot traffic, other hikers heading up as they were coming down, provided a strange comfort. A family with 2 teenage children passed them, nodding friendly greetings. An older couple rested on a bench at the junction, consulting a guidebook. The normalcy of these encounters helped ease some of Emma's tension. "See? Plenty of people on the mountain," Jake offered, clearly hoping to reassure her. "But not on our trail," Emma reminded him. "The ranger said we were the only ones with permits for Blackrock Trail yesterday." They reached the ranger station shortly after 2 p.m. The same ranger who had checked them in was at the desk, looking surprised to see them return so soon. "Everything all right?" he asked, taking in their tired expressions. Emma pulled out her camera without preamble. "We saw someone on the trail yesterday. Someone who shouldn't have been there." The ranger's eyebrows rose slightly. "Oh? Another hiker? You tell me," Emma said, turning her camera display toward him. "You said we were the only ones with permits for that trail yesterday." The ranger took the camera, studying the photo carefully. His expression remained neutral, but Emma noticed a slight tightening around his eyes. "Where exactly was this taken?" he asked, his tone deliberately casual. "Eagles Point," Jake supplied. "Around 3 p.m. yesterday." The ranger handed the camera back, his movements measured. "And you didn't actually see this person? Just caught them in the photo?" Emma exchanged a glance with Jake. "I saw them in the photo immediately after taking it. But when I looked up, there was no one there." The ranger nodded slowly, as though this confirmed something. "And you didn't encounter anyone else during your hike? No one passed you going up or coming down?" "No one," Emma confirmed. "The trail was completely empty except for us." The ranger turned to his computer, typing something quickly. "Wait here a moment," he said before disappearing into a back office. Left alone, Emma and Jake shared a concerned look. "He knows something," Emma whispered. Jake nodded. "That wasn't the reaction of someone who thinks we're just being paranoid hikers." A few minutes later, the ranger returned with an older man in a more formal uniform, the park superintendent, according to his badge. "I'm Howard Benson," the older man introduced himself. "Mind if I take a look at that photo?" Emma handed over her camera again. The superintendent studied it intently, zooming in on the figure in the background. "Could you describe exactly what happened when you took this picture?" he asked, his voice carrying the weight of authority. Emma recounted the experience in detail. How she had been photographing Jake at Eagles Point, how she'd immediately noticed the figure in the background of the photo, and how the person had vanished without a trace when she looked up. The superintendent and the ranger exchanged a significant look. "Have there been other reports?" Jake asked, picking up on their silent communication. Instead of answering directly, Superintendent Benson pulled a folder from beneath the counter and opened it. Inside was a missing persons flyer with a photograph of a smiling man in his 30s with a neatly trimmed beard and bright eyes. "This is Daniel Parker," Benson said gravely. "He went missing on Black Rock Trail 6 weeks ago." Emma stared at the photograph of Daniel Parker, her mind struggling to process the implications. The man in the missing persons flyer looked nothing like the figure in her photograph. This Daniel was vibrant and healthy, with clear eyes and an easy smile. The hunched figure she'd captured had been gaunt, almost spectral. "I don't understand," she said finally. "This doesn't look like the same person." Superintendent Benson nodded grimly. "No, it wouldn't. Not after 6 weeks in the wilderness." The words hung heavy in the air. Jake placed a protective hand on Emma's shoulder. "Are you suggesting?" Jake began, then paused, seeming reluctant to voice the conclusion. "We don't know anything for certain," Benson replied, his tone carefully measured. "But I'd like to bring in Ranger Michaels. She led the original search for Daniel." He made a quick phone call, and within 10 minutes, a woman in her late 40s entered the station. Ranger Michaels had weathered features and sharp, intelligent eyes that immediately focused on Emma's camera. "Show me," she said without preamble. Emma handed over the camera once more. Michael studied the image with the focused intensity of someone who had been searching for answers for a long time. "Where exactly on Eagles Point was this taken?" she asked. Jake described the location in detail, even sketching a rough map on a piece of paper. "And you're certain no one else was on the trail?" Michaels pressed. "The station said we were the only ones with permits," Emma confirmed. "And we didn't see a single other person until we reached the main junction on our way down today." Michaels turned to Benson. "It's within the search radius. Roughly 2 miles from where we found his last campsite." Benson nodded, then addressed Emma and Jake. "Daniel Parker was an experienced solo hiker. He came up for what was supposed to be a 3-day trip on Black Rock Trail. When he didn't return, his sister reported him missing. We launched a full search and rescue operation," Michaels continued. "Had teams combing the entire mountain for 2 weeks. Dogs, helicopters, thermal imaging, everything we had. But you never found him," Jake stated, rather than asked. "We found his first campsite," Michaels said, "and evidence that he'd moved on from there. But then the trail went cold. It was like he just vanished." Emma felt a chill run through her. "What do you think happened to him?" Michaels and Benson exchanged another glance, clearly weighing how much to share. "Officially," Benson said carefully, "he remains a missing person. The working theory was that he may have fallen from one of the steeper sections of the trail, perhaps in an area we couldn't access during the search." "And unofficially?" Emma pressed. Michaels sighed. "Unofficially, it's one of the strangest cases I've worked in 20 years with the Park Service. Daniel knew these mountains. He wasn't the type to make rookie mistakes. And the way the trail just ended." She didn't finish the thought, but she didn't need to. The implication was clear: something unusual had happened to Daniel Parker. "His sister still comes by every week," Benson added quietly. "Hoping for news. Closure." Emma looked down at the photograph of Daniel again, then back at her camera. Is it possible that's him in my photo?" Michaels studied the image once more. "The build matches. The clothing description matches what he was reported to be wearing: faded green jacket, dark hiking pants. But how could he still be?" Jake began, then stopped himself. No one wanted to state the obvious, that after 6 weeks without supplies in the wilderness, Daniel Parker couldn't possibly be alive. And yet, there was clearly someone or something in Emma's photograph. "There's something else you should know," Michaels said after a moment. "Daniel isn't the first person to go missing on that trail. Emma and Jake exchanged alarmed glances. There have been others? Jake asked. 3 cases in the past decade, Benson confirmed. All experienced hikers. All on solo trips. None of them ever found. Why isn't the trail closed? Emma demanded, a flash of anger cutting through her fear. If people keep disappearing. Because there's never been any evidence of foul play. Michaels interrupted. No signs of animal attacks, no indications of criminal activity. Just disappearances. And the truth is, Benson added reluctantly, we've never had anything concrete to go on. No witnesses, no photos, nothing but empty backpacks found days or weeks later. Until now, Michaels said, tapping Emma's camera. This is the first potential sighting of anyone who's gone missing. The room fell silent as they all contemplated the implications. We need to go back up there, Michaels said finally, decision made. I want to check the exact spot where this photo was taken. Today? Emma asked, exhaustion suddenly weighing on her. They'd just come down from an unsettling night on the mountain. Michaels shook her head. First light tomorrow. We'll assemble a small search team, just the 4 of us, plus our search and rescue coordinator. The fewer people, the better. We want to help, Jake said firmly, looking to Emma for confirmation. She nodded without hesitation. If there's any chance he's still up there, still alive somehow, she began. We need to manage expectations, Benson cautioned. The likelihood of finding Daniel alive after 6 weeks is extremely low. But his family deserves answers, Michaels added. And this is the first real lead we've had. They spent the next hour reviewing maps of the area and formulating a plan. Emma transferred the photograph to the ranger's computer, where they analyzed it more carefully on a larger screen. There's something else, Emma said suddenly, noticing a detail she'd missed before. In the enlarged image, the figure appeared to be holding something, a small object clutched in one hand. Can you enhance that section? Michaels asked. Emma adjusted the contrast and zoomed in further. The object became clearer, a small notebook or journal. Daniel kept a journal, Michaels said quietly. His sister mentioned it was always with him on hikes. We never found it. As the reality of tomorrow's search settled over them, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that the photograph had captured something beyond normal explanation, a moment where the boundary between the present and the past, between life and death, had somehow blurred. Whatever awaited them on the mountain, she knew their lives would never be the same. Dawn broke with muted colors over Blackrock Mountain as Emma, Jake, and the small search team assembled at the trailhead. Despite her exhaustion, Emma had barely slept, her mind replaying the image of the mysterious figure over and over. The possibility that they might find Daniel, or whatever remained of him, filled her with equal parts hope and dread. Ranger Michaels introduced them to Reed Cooper, the search and rescue coordinator. He was a lean, quiet man with methodical movements and eyes that missed nothing. I've been over this trail a dozen times looking for Parker, he told them as they geared up. If he's still up there, he doesn't want to be found. The statement hung in the air, its ambiguity unsettling. Emma wasn't sure if Cooper meant Daniel was intentionally hiding or if something else entirely prevented his discovery. We'll focus exclusively on the area around Eagles Point, Michaels explained, checking her radio. Emma and Jake will guide us to the exact location where the photo was taken. They set off at a brisk pace, retracing Emma and Jake's route from 2 days before. The mountain seemed different somehow, more watchful, as if the very rocks were observing their ascent. Anything look familiar from the search? Superintendent Benson asked Cooper as they climbed. Cooper nodded. We found his first campsite about 2 miles up, near Falcon Ridge. Signs showed he continued toward Eagles Point, but the trail disappeared. No footprints, no broken vegetation, nothing. Could he have gone off trail? Jake asked. If he did, he was a ghost about it, Cooper replied grimly. And Daniel was good, but nobody's that good. They reached the narrow passage that led to Eagles Point by mid-morning. Emma felt a wave of apprehension as they approached the spot where she'd taken the photograph. She half expected to see the figure still standing there, waiting for them. "This is it," she said, stopping at the exact place she'd stood. "I was facing this direction, with Jake standing near the edge." Jake positioned himself as he had been, though he stayed farther from the precipice this time. Emma raised her camera, more as a demonstration than to take another photo. "And the figure was standing there," she said, pointing to a flat area about 20 feet behind Jake. Cooper immediately moved to the spot, kneeling to examine the ground. "Nothing obvious," he reported. "No footprints, no disturbances." "What about that side trail we noticed on the way down?" Emma suggested. "The one that wasn't on the map. Could Daniel have used that?" Michaels looked confused. "What side trail?" Emma and Jake exchanged glances. "Yesterday, on our descent, we noticed a narrow trail branching off the main path about an hour below here," Jake explained. "We didn't see it on our way up." Cooper's expression sharpened. "Show me." They descended to where Emma and Jake remembered seeing the trail. Upon reaching the area, Emma stopped in confusion. The distinct path they'd seen the day before was nowhere to be found. "It was right here," she insisted, scanning the rocky terrain. "A clear trail heading east between those boulders." Cooper approached the boulders, examining them closely. "Wait," he said suddenly, dropping to his hands and knees. "There's something here." The others crowded around. Nearly invisible unless you were looking for it, a narrow gained trail wound between the rocks. It showed signs of recent use, subtle, but present to Cooper's trained eye. "This isn't on any official map," Michaels confirmed, checking her GPS. Cooper led the way, moving cautiously along the hidden trail. It descended slightly before cutting across the mountain's eastern face, following a route that would be invisible from the main trail. After 20 minutes of careful progress, the path opened into a small, sheltered plateau. Everyone stopped abruptly. In the center of the natural clearing stood a crude shelter, a tarp strung between stunted trees, anchored with climbing rope to form a primitive tent. Around it, signs of long-term habitation were evident: a small, cold fire pit lined with stones, a makeshift seat fashioned from fallen logs, various pieces of equipment arranged with careful precision. "That's a survival camp," Cooper said unnecessarily, his voice tight with professional assessment. "Well constructed, meant to last." They approached slowly, almost reverently. The camp appeared abandoned but intact, as if its occupant had just stepped away momentarily. Michaels pulled on latex gloves before carefully lifting the edge of the tarp. "Daniel?" she called, though it was clear no one had been here for some time. Inside the shelter, they found a carefully organized living space. A sleeping bag was laid out on a bed of pine boughs. A backpack, recognizably hiking equipment but weathered almost beyond recognition, leaned against a rock wall. And there, placed deliberately in the center of a flat stone that served as a table, lay a water bottle, a torn map with markings, and a leather-bound journal. Michaels lifted the journal with trembling hands. "This is his," she confirmed, recognizing the distinctive cover Daniel's sister had described. She opened it carefully, the pages stiff from exposure to mountain air. Emma peered over her shoulder as she turned to the final entry. The handwriting was shaky but legible. "Day 8. Injured my leg badly on the north face. Can't put weight on it. Food nearly gone. Too weak to go further. If anyone finds this, tell my family I tried." The date matched exactly 6 weeks earlier. "He was alive at least 8 days after he went missing," Benson noted, his expression grave. Cooper had been examining the area around the camp. "There's a trail leading down from here," he called from beyond the clearing. "Looks like someone tried to descend, and in a hurry." They followed Cooper down a steep, treacherous slope. The path, barely discernible as such, wound between jagged rocks and along the edge of a ravine. In places, they could see where someone had grabbed at vegetation for support, leaving behind broken stems and disturbed earth. "He was desperate," Michaels observed quietly. "Trying to get down any way he could." 100 yards down, Cooper stopped so abruptly that Jake nearly collided with him. "Don't come any closer," he warned, raising a hand. But Emma had already seen what Cooper had found. At the bottom of a steep drop, partially concealed by underbrush and weathered by 6 weeks of mountain elements, lay human remains. Even from a distance, the green jacket was recognizable as the one Daniel had been wearing in the missing person flyer, the same jacket the figure in Emma's photograph had worn. "We found him," Michael said softly, her professional demeanor cracking slightly. As the reality of their discovery settled over the group, Emma felt a strange sensation, not exactly relief, but a shifting, as if something that had been out of alignment had finally clicked into place. What none of them could explain, however, was how Daniel Parker, who had clearly died in this ravine 6 weeks ago, had appeared standing on Eagles Point just 2 days earlier, watching as Emma took Jake's photograph. 3 days after their discovery on the mountain, Emma sat in the small living room of a modest suburban home, her camera resting on her lap. Across from her, Sarah Parker, Daniel's sister, held the photograph Emma had printed for her. Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she studied the image of her brother, captured in an impossible moment. "I don't understand it," Sarah said finally, her voice soft but steady. "But I don't need to. This is the first time I've seen him since." She trailed off, unable to complete the thought. The recovery operation had been completed yesterday. Daniel's remains had been brought down from the mountain with solemn dignity, the search and rescue team forming an impromptu honor guard. The mystery of his disappearance had been solved: a serious leg injury, isolation, and a fatal fall during a desperate attempt to find help. But the enigma of his appearance in Emma's photograph remained unexplained. "He loved those mountains," Sarah continued, gazing at the picture. "Even when we were kids, he'd disappear for hours, exploring every trail he could find." She looked up at Emma with eyes that held grief but also something else, a quiet wonder. "I think somehow, he's still there." Jake shifted uncomfortably beside Emma. He had been the most skeptical among them, searching for rational explanations even as they'd stood over Daniel's remains. But even he had run out of logical theories. "His journal," Emma said gently. "Did the Rangers give it to you?" Sarah nodded, reaching for a leather-bound book on the coffee table. "They did. I've read it a dozen times already." She opened it to a dog-eared page. "He wrote about finding secret places on the mountain that weren't on any map. Places he said felt thin, like the boundary between worlds wasn't as solid there." Emma felt a chill despite the warmth of the room. "That's how I would describe it," she admitted. "When I took that photo, it was like 2 moments existed simultaneously. The Rangers told me you were the only ones who noticed that hidden trail," Sarah said. "The one that led to his camp. It appeared differently to us on different days," Jake added, finally joining the conversation. "First it wasn't there, then it was, then it wasn't again." Sarah nodded as if this made perfect sense. "Daniel wrote about that too. He believed certain paths on the mountain only revealed themselves when they needed to be found." She smiled faintly. "I always thought he was being poetic." Emma thought about the sequence of events. How she and Jake had chosen that specific trail on that specific day, how she had captured that impossible photograph, how they had been the ones to finally bring Daniel home. "Do you think he was trying to be found?" she asked softly. Sarah closed the journal, running her fingers over its worn cover. "I think he needed to be found," she corrected. "Not just for himself, but for me. For closure." After leaving Sarah's home, Emma and Jake drove in silence toward their own house. The mountains loomed in the distance, beautiful and mysterious against the late afternoon sky. "The Rangers are calling it an optical illusion," Jake said finally. "Some kind of weird light effect that made it look like someone was there." Emma smiled faintly. "Is that what you believe?" Jake was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know what I believe anymore," he admitted. "But I know what I saw in that ravine. And I know it couldn't be the same man who appeared in your photograph." "Ranger Michaels pulled me aside this morning," Emma said. "She told me there are stories about Blackrock Mountain going back generations. The indigenous people who lived here believed it was a place where the veil between worlds was thin. Like Daniel wrote in his journal." Jake noted. Emma nodded. She said some people believe that those who die on the mountain sometimes linger, unable or unwilling to leave until they're found. They pulled into their driveway as the sun began to set, casting long shadows across their front yard. Emma sat for a moment, looking at her camera on the seat between them. "I've been thinking about deleting it," she admitted. "The photograph." Jake looked surprised. "Why would you do that?" "Because it feels private somehow. Like we witnessed something we weren't meant to see." Jake considered this, then shook his head. "I think we were meant to see it, Em. That's the whole point. We were meant to find him." That night, Emma downloaded all the photos from their mountain trip onto her computer. She paused when she reached the image of Jake at Eagles Point with Daniel's figure in the background. Something about it still tugged at her consciousness, some details she hadn't fully processed. She zoomed in on Daniel's face, which was partially turned away. Using her editing software, she enhanced the image, adjusting the exposure to reveal more detail. And then she saw it. Daniel wasn't looking at Jake, as she'd initially thought. He was looking directly at the camera. At Emma. And he was smiling. A week later, Emma stood in a small gallery where her nature photography was being exhibited. Among the landscapes and wildlife shots was a new series titled Boundaries, featuring images from Black Rock Mountain. She had debated whether to include the photograph with Daniel, ultimately deciding against it. Some things weren't meant to be shared with the world. Instead, the final image in the series showed Eagles Point at sunset, the rock formation silhouetted against a blazing sky. To most viewers, it was simply a beautiful landscape. But Emma knew what lay just out of frame, a hidden trail that appeared and disappeared, leading to a campsite where a lost hiker had left his final message. Sarah Parker stood beside Emma, gazing at the photograph. "He would have loved this," she said quietly. Emma nodded, feeling a sense of completion. "I'm going back next month," she said, "to take more photographs." "Will you look for him?" Sarah asked. Emma considered the question. "I don't think I'll need to," she replied finally. "I think the mountain shows you what you need to see, when you need to see it." As visitors moved around them, admiring the images of natural beauty, Emma felt a peculiar certainty that what had happened on the mountain wasn't an ending, but a beginning, an invitation to understand that some boundaries were more permeable than they appeared, and that sometimes, a camera could capture what the eye could not see. In her pocket, her fingers closed around Daniel's water bottle cap, which Sarah had insisted she keep. A small token from a journey that had started as a simple hiking trip and become something far more profound. Whatever mystery lived on Black Rock Mountain, Emma knew one thing for certain: she had helped bring a lost soul home, and in doing so, discovered something about the nature of reality that would stay with her always.